Let me start this off again. I am Alan Abramowitz. I'm the CEO of the Arc of Florida. It's great to see some self-advocates, a lot of providers, and some experts. In fact, I consider family members like Amanda the experts because they live with the challenges every day, and a lot of you on here, realize that your experience kind of makes you an expert, maybe an expert in frustration, but an expert nonetheless. And, this call is primarily made for providers, but we invite everyone. In fact, most of the providers in our business, their boards are made up of family members and local people in the community that care about our issues. So, we really maintain the Arc of Florida as a grassroots advocacy, and we make this provider forum available every month, not just to share with you what's going on, but also to learn from you, especially the challenges we're having. Today, we're going to talk a lot about budget with Jim DeBeaugrine. We're going to talk about process because it's a kind of the strangest session we've ever had regarding persons with disability budget and ACA budget, because the money for rate increases are in bills. And, normally it's at the end of the last couple of days of session and everyone's sweating, waiting to see what's going to happen. And normally we end up continue sweating afterwards because we normally don't get things. But this time there's some good signs. And so, Jim, I'll be calling on you in a little about that. Also, the process and the timeframes that things happen. But this is a very exciting session. I've never been so excited since Jeb Bush settled the Pareto-Steinman settlement and removed everyone off the wait list back in 2000. So I think we have good times ahead. But the first thing I'd like to talk about, because we got a special guest here, another expert, an expert because she's a parent, and not only is she a parent in understanding the issues related to raising a child with disabilities, but also an expert in how to navigate or how to stumble through the process that APT has. But she has become an expert in how to make changes, how to be a person that unites other family members to come together to make a difference. And I think she particularly is a big part of why we're speaking with One Voices. I give her a lot of credit for that. She cares so passionately, and she's going to talk about her story real quick about how come we have a bill there to try to start fixing some of these things from a parent in crisis point of view. And so Stephanie Norden, from We the People, For the People, By the People, is there more than that, or is that enough? Is that enough?
That's enough. Hi, everyone.
But Stephanie, thank you. We appreciate what you're doing. Can you explain your journey and how we got here today?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Norden, and I am a mom of 4 boys. I have 4 teenagers in this house. Logan and Gavin, my 2 oldest boys, have severe autism, and we have had every regular autism parent struggle since they were diagnosed at 12 months. I was in schools with them, battling IEPs and safety, compliance, all the issues we go through in the school system. And I struggled with that for a really long time, and then discovered a private school option for my boys that was great in the sense that it had that small learning environment for them. And I watched my children go from banging their heads in the corner all day long to actually reaching out and giving me a hug and using the restroom and using their voice and appreciating life. Like I saw my boys flourish in those years. It was fabulous. But we had an accident February 7th, 2022. So about 2 years ago now. My son Logan had an accident at that private school, and he fell out at their school window. He broke his skull in 5 places, his back in 5 places. Both of his arms were compounded fractures, meaning the bones were sticking out of the skin. He had blood on the brain, swelling on the brain, punctured lungs. I didn't think Logan was going to make it. And right around the time we were life flighted to Tampa General, and right around that time, his twin brother Gavin, who's just as significantly impacted by autism as Logan, was discharged from that private school, and I knew that we were in trouble and needed to have services right away, yesterday. So I reached out to the Agency of Persons with Disabilities and alerted them to our crisis. Did a lot of homework while I was in that trauma ICU waiting room because I had no other choice but to pray and to try to get help. Um, Unfortunately, I met the Agency of Persons with Disabilities and the struggles that they are going through meeting needs of families. And even though I emailed and followed up and called and did all the paperwork, it still took over a year for Logan and Gavin to get help through the APD. So in that time period, Logan was in the hospital for like 46 days. I got returned home with no services, no continuing care, just me, and now just not my one kid, but all four of my kids.
Hmm.
And I began to get desperate. As I called, it said, "Hey, is it going to happen this month? Is it going to happen this month?" And it didn't. Eventually, I went and met with my local legislator and said, I went to our legislative delegation meeting and just said, "Hey, I don't know what to do. I've tried this, X, Y, Z. Can you guys help me?" And, beautifully, the answer was yes. One of our representatives took me back to her office about a week after the meeting, and she said, "Steph, I'm going to help you," because I had already had ideas. I know how there's common sense solutions here. We're not exercising. Can we do these things to make it better for other families? And she said, "Yes, but first we're going to help your family." And her office, and combined with our local senator's office, advocated, and 4 months later, services got started. So I began meeting with Representative Mello probably about once a month, and just letting her know the updates of what's going on. And then I really started to get serious about this summer. It means a lot to me that families aren't walking through dark moments like that alone. And so I wrote House Bill 1047
Okay,
and
hit the button.
Senate Bill 1170.
Yeah.
Um, and I have been working side by side with our legislators, letting them know what's going on currently and how to help families who are in crisis. And just since I really started it, I finished the bill in August. And then in August, we started the We the People group, kind of on accident, just getting other families to understand that if you tell your truth, your story to legislators, that they can help and they will help. And that has been a fabulous success. We have families all across the state that are sharing their stories with their legislators, and it's because of us. It's because of us families. I believe that this is a really exciting session. I'm super thrilled that like we're in the governor's budget, the Live Healthy initiative, kind of the talk of the media right now, on a lot of our the bills coming up. And so my story is one of like, don't quit when you want to quit, and you're not alone. We are unbelievably powerful as families because we have the data that's missing. So
Stephanie, I know that one of the things you learned is that you felt like common sense was missing and a sense of urgency. And so I've noticed that it's not only just one bill, but there's actually four bills that use some of your language. Can you talk about what the language is and why that language was important to you?
So 1047 is my language, like clean. The first part of the bill is talking about making the process of applying available online, electronic. So we would still have the ability for people who don't have the technology to fill out the form and mail it in. Or if you have the ability to, you can go online, fill out the application, and instantly your information will be verified that they've received it. So there is communication and a good start right off the bat. And then the second part of the bill is right now, currently, if you're in crisis, the Agency of Persons with Disabilities has 45 days to determine eligibility. And in my case, that was about 40 days too late. It was very difficult for me to get nurses in the ICU to let me use their fax again, and to download this form and print out this while I was trying to get these crises set up. So the way the bill is written now is that we have 5 days to determine eligibility and get some supports in the home. If it takes longer, if there's like QSIs, if there's assessments that need to be done, so be it. But we're going to do that with help in the home, because it's impossible to get that information in a timely manner without having some help. And then the third part of the bill is CDC Plus, Consumer Directed Care Plus, is an alternative to the traditional iBudget waiver. And in my case, it took 10 months to transfer from one to the next. And so we have written in there that it should take 14 days. Families will be educated on the onset that you've applied for services. You'll know what the two different program options are. And if you so choose to go from iBudget to CDC Plus, there's 14 days so that it's streamlined for families to be able to direct their own care if need be. And I think that part is very important to me, with the given that there's such a provider crisis. We still would not have we still wouldn't have services in our home today if we had iBudget. So I know that's the case for a lot of families until they build that provider pool.
Yeah, I just want to make mention that another family member here, Amanda, she got action when she testified at a delegation meeting. And Amanda, you know, we were very proud of you that you stood up and spoke truth to power, and things happened. I think it was in Putnam County. And all of a sudden people started taking notice, and they paid attention to you, and there was a sense of urgency. Did you have any comment about how that was? Because, I know we have a lot of people here today, and there were 80 delegation meetings, and they can only have delegation meetings when session's not going on. So they're over. And a lot of the activity, there were people speaking about the issues that Stephanie was talking about and what happened to Amanda at these 80 delegation meetings. And virtually every one of them had people like JJ and other of our friends that would speak of their issues. Amanda, did you want to comment on that before we get to the gym and start talking about what's happening this session?
I wouldn't have even known about delegation meetings if it wasn't for the group that Stephanie founded, and I wouldn't know about the group if it wasn't for Melissa Mazita. And so all of last year, what I tell people, I was building a spider web of people. So and to help, and it guided me to the right place. And I just talked to anyone and everyone who would listen, whether they wanted to or not. And we got our approval for the crisis waiver in November, and I started it in March of last year. So now we're working on that fund budget piece. So,
Oh, great job, Amanda. Thanks for speaking up. I saw Melissa's on here too. We appreciate Melissa and her energy that's beyond anyone else's on this call, I'm certain. But Jim, I'd like to go to you now. You know, it's funny. The first day of session was January 9th, last week. I mean, we just started it. And we're talking about rate increases and budget. Explain how that could happen. Because every year we're on the last couple of days sweating it out. Tell a little about the process and why we're here where we are with I think it's House Senate bill, the Florida Senate Live Healthy bill.
Yeah, well, why don't we just start with that? Like Alan said, normally we're hoping to get into one budget. Well, before I start, I did want to just a quick shout out to Alan and the Arc of Florida for organizing these forums. I think this is important, and I think it in a way is the Arc fulfilling its original mission, which my in-laws were the founders of the Putnam County ARC, or one of many founding directors of the ARC of Putnam County. So, Amanda, that particular chapter and that area of the state is near and dear to me. But normally we're hoping to get into either the House or Senate budget. We're hoping to get either, particularly for the providers, and because the legislature has typically put money in the budget for the wait list. They've been really, really good and consistent about that over the years. Now, we've had concerns that the money for the waiting list is not really resulting in larger numbers of people getting served. A lot of what we've seen is that the dollars just kind of disappear into the appropriate, well, in fact, APD is just not spending all the dollars lately that they've gotten in their budget. And that's a concern to a lot of people because as many of you know firsthand, there's a lot of need out there that's not getting met. And it's frustrating, I think, when the legislature appropriates money and then it's not used despite the very well documented needs that exist. But normally, as far as providers are concerned, you know, we're struggling. We as providers, we're struggling to make payroll, to recruit staff, to ensure that services are available. And because we're an optional program, there's no, the legislature considers rate increases on an ad hoc basis each year. We're almost never in the agency's budget request. In fact, there was not an across-the-board budget rate increase this year, although the governor did provide a recommendation for rate increases. So usually we're hoping to get into either the House or the Senate. That rarely happens. So that's kind of why we're usually sweating it out until the very last day of session. When if the legislature does anything, it's usually high drama. We find out in the last day or two of session. And we've had some success, but again, we're in a lot better shape today, this year, than I think we've ever been. Just to give you a real quick lay of the land as to where things stand. As Alan mentioned, there's Senate Bill 7016, which is the Senate President's Live Healthy bill. And that bill, it is it's like a 200-page bill. It covers all kinds of provisions that are related to access to medical care. It encourages and promotes medical professionals to who get their training in the state to stay in the state. But one really important, and there's nothing in that bill. If you did a search on Chapter 393, which is the APD chapter of the Florida statutes, that bill would not show up in a search because Chapter 393 is not mentioned. However, there is a very important provision in that bill that's of vital interest to all the providers out there, and by extension all the families and individuals that they serve. And that it includes, because this whole bill is aimed at shoring up capacity of the healthcare system, and to their credit, they didn't forget about us. So the bill includes a $195.8 million general rate increase. It's not earmarked to salaries or anything else. It recognizes all of the various increased costs that our provider community has faced. And as far as I can tell, that's about a 10% rate increase. Now, the bill doesn't specify that it has to be 10%. APD and ACA would ultimately develop a new rate table, but if you just look at the numbers, and I think the intent is that is an across-the-board 10% rate increase, and that's all services. There is a companion measure in the House, House Bill 1549 by Representative Grant. It includes a lot of the same provisions. It lines up, not perfectly, but it does line up. It's the companion measure for the Senate bill, and it provides a $68.5 million rate increase. That is, I'm going to guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 3% rate increase. It similarly is across the board. The governor, also a shout out to the governor, he recommended a $60.2 million rate increase, and that's targeted to five different services. Adult day training, that's a 5% increase. Supported living coaching, I think he did 10% for that. Residential habilitation, 5%. Private duty nursing, which the intent behind that is to bring the APD nursing rate up to the Medicaid state plan rate. And then all of the therapies, the occupational therapy, the physical therapy, respiratory therapy, so forth. And that was also a 10%. So we're in good shape. We've got both the House and Senate that have already telegraphed that there's going to be a rate increase. The issue is going to be how much. The governor has supported rate increases, albeit his were targeted. So all of the powers that be appear to be lined up. So our drama and the fight that we're going to be undertaking over the next couple of months is going to be what's the amount? And then there's going to be the question, is this going to be targeted rate increases or is it going to be across the board? So that's extremely, extremely positive, like Alan mentioned.
Jim, can I mention something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, there's 234 pages to the bill. And on page 231, which is section 86, they talk about the 10% rate increase in the Senate. On the House side, it's 3.5%. And, the Senate's kind of taking the lead because this was President Pasadomo's priority. And it's already finished every committee in the Senate. It's going to have second reading already. We're in the second week of session, and the second reading is next week. On the House side, which is amazing, is the bill was filed last week, and within 2 days, it had a hearing in the House. I've never seen that happen, Jim. I don't know if you have, but I've never seen something like that happen where within 2 days of filing a bill, it gets scheduled. Well, it chooses the committees it goes to, it gets scheduled, and actually gets heard. So I thought that was pretty impressive. And hopefully the next committee, which is an appropriate, and it was voted on yes from both committees unanimously. And on the House side, the next committee it goes to is the Health Policy Appropriations subcommittee, which is the one that hopefully they'll go up to the Senate side. So is that real unusual, you think?
It's not unusual if it's the Senate President's bill, but yes,
Okay.
it's unusual. It's just on the House side, Senator Grant's bill, it's already moved through one committee. It only has 3 committees of reference. Again, something's going to happen. It's just a matter of where are they going to settle? Is it going to be 10%? Is it going to be 3.5%? Is it going to be, is it going to be something else? And what I want to do, I see questions in the chat, and I see Kaya Rodriguez has her hand up. Dina, Alan, if you'll help me keep track of these, I'll get to, I think what I can do is I'll get to all of the questions
Okay.
at once.
Jim, let me do this. How about Dina, you call out the questions, but what I'd like to do after we go through some of these questions, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about where we are with last year's, what's happening with the money now. Because I think the difficult part for legislators is there's these huge surpluses, yet people aren't being served. And that really deals with the rate increase. But I would like you to talk about where we are with regard to reversion and stuff. And I got the handout you sent me. I mean, the thing you sent me. But I just want to get an understanding about how complicated this is. I know you mentioned the wait list earlier, but what you didn't say, and you've taught me well on this stuff, is over the previous 5 years that they've invested significant money, yet the number of people on the wait list has gone up very little. I mean, like 3%, while they invested like 28% in the waiver. So anyway, Dina, do you have some questions there?
Yeah, there's a lot of comments, but we do have a few questions.
You can read the comments too, and Jim can comment on it.
Okay, so one is, has Florida considered contracting the participant enrollment process to a third party that specializes in the process?
That is a good question, and no, not to my knowledge, and I would probably know if Florida had seriously considered something like that. So no.
Jim, would that be similar? Would that be similar to managed care though, if they did that?
I think what now again, and if the person wants to clarify, but I think what they're talking about is the eligibility intake process.
Yeah.
Or read it again,
So,
Dina.
okay, so, and maybe Randy could just ask his question because he's made some comments. Randy?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so many states actually use third party for home and community-based service enrollment through the initial screening to the level of care assessment for home and community-based non-managed care. It's actually very convenient in the absence of available workers. Yeah, I did have a lot of comments in there. I didn't know when they would be addressed, but a lot of the reason I feel that there is a surplus in APD is because there's a very restricted provider process in terms of the providers that are able to help the people with their ADLs, with their home mods, with their emergency response systems. We're restricted on the enrollment end, where the enrollment process is you have to be in the county that you're enrolling in, and that's it. And you have to prove yourself for 12 to 18 months before you can expand your enrollment. Whereas all of the ACA programs and DOEA programs allow you to be a statewide provider from the point of enrollment. So the question would be is why does APD stand in their own way when it comes to providers that are willing to help people?
That's a great question, and I have, I've often wondered that myself. I even wondered that back when, honestly, I don't, I don't think anybody at APD could answer your question, because I think there is a long history and that whole, I think what you're talking about is really a vestige of their days when they were part of the old HRS, which then became DCF.
Right.
In the old HRS, it was almost like you had, back in the day, there were 11 HRS districts, and they all operated almost like standalone regional departments.
Yeah.
And each HRS district had its own rules. And then when I came into APD, APD is basically the old DS program that was in HRS that got carved out. And when it got carved out, they continued that district structure. We had 11 regional offices. And these regional offices had a great deal of autonomy. Some of the regional offices had their own provider qualification process, so that there was one region that required special training that no other region. I think that's just a relic of history. And I'm just offering you my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not speaking for anybody.
Yeah.
Other than myself. I think that it makes no sense. I agree with you. And I don't think there's a good answer to your question. And I think it would be a very positive move that if you're qualified to be a provider in Tallahassee, then you're qualified to be a provider anywhere else.
Right. It just makes it's just made so hard to for providers to do that. Now, I know that, from working in multiple states, there's a mandate, and the reason why a lot of these developmental and intellectual disability programs are carved out is because of the targeted case management requirements. But the reimbursement rates for targeted case management can't be less than Walmart.
Right.
It just can't. These folks have to go to a school. Most of these WSCs might also be in a nurse RN role because of the specialty that's required depending on the person's disability. So if we're saying that there's a surplus of unused funding, what about consideration for ramping up a better reimbursement scale for the WSCs, so the agencies for APD can be adequately staffed to take on these new cases and get these folks the help that they need?
Yeah, well, as far as I can tell, Randy, the across the board rate increases in the two bills that we're talking about would accrue to support coordination, and support coordinators did get a rate increase last session as well. So I think their issues are being addressed, I think, by the two bills. Now, the governor's rec would not include support coordinators, so that's just an issue of what what do they go with? What version of the provider package do they go with? Dina, do you want to?
Yeah, let me go down the list here. I know Kaya's had her hand up, and then I've got some other questions.
Well, I'll tell you what, if we're on questions right now, why don't we get to Kaya real quick?
Okay, yeah.
She's had her hand up for a long time.
Go ahead, Kaya.
Yeah. What are they planning to do with all these people on the wait list that have no services, and there's funding, but they're not spending it, and they're not spending it wisely? Like, I'm on there and I have health issues and I'm on dilemma because of that. Other than that, I'm still on the board of art because Patty Rendon got me involved, and it's very interesting to me. So I'd rather sit on the board and take a spot than drop off the wait list and never get back on, even though I plan to maybe get my driver's license. Because now my support coordinator is sending me all kinds of information on that, which has never been done, Suzanne Almeyer. And she wants to keep up with ARC and she wants to come on board. But as a support coordinator, I don't know is she allowed to listen in to some of our meetings, or do I just need to forward information to her, or how do I do that exactly? Because I told her I would check back with you all on that. Because
One thing is all our meetings are taped and we put it on the YouTube channel. And Kaya, I'll send you the link on Facebook because we message each other. But great,
yes, we
that was a great question about,
okay.
on the wait list and can't get services. That is a great
Yeah.
question.
Like if you need it and you don't have like my health insurance, I just switched from an HMO POS to dual enrollment, which they have numbers that you call to get providers or services to get you to pharmacies and doctors, which is great because that has never been brought up to my attention, and that's through United Healthcare.
Okay.
And that's a very good point because I don't know how many people are as smart as me and would know to check with that. So
Yeah.
that's something else like the other lady on 110 was asking about that I forwarded that question to you.
Yeah.
And maybe she didn't know the information that I knew, but yeah, if somebody needs that kind of information, I know exactly how to get into that system to find that particular answer. You just call your health insurance and ask for telesales health, or because you can move at the beginning of once a month if a doctor drops off.
Yeah. Hey,
So that's another good point.
do you want to talk about FIST funds and and how that works with general revenue when you're on the wait list?
Yeah. Oh, you mean the ifs?
If funds,
family
yeah.
supports. Yeah, there's a pot of money. It's very limited for people on the waiting list. It's authorized. Funding is authorized on a case by case basis, usually by the area offices. As I'd mentioned earlier, the legislature has consistently provided funding for the waiting list. Unfortunately, it has not. It has rarely gone past enrolling people in crisis, and as I'd mentioned earlier, the legislature has actually made a several $100 million investment in the waiting list, now called pre-enrollment, over the years. However, the impact on overall number of waiver enrollees has not been what you would expect given the amount of waitlist funding. As far as the governors, now we don't know what the legislature is going to do for the waiting list. We do know the governor has recommended 79 million for the waiting list. And Alan, I wanted to mention there has been a bill filed, and it is a long shot bill because there's no House companion, but it's a bill that was filed by Senator Powell. And let me get the number for that. It's Senate Bill 1550. And I just shout out to Senator Powell for bringing this up, but his bill would require APD to request funding sufficient to serve 25% of their waiting list in their legislative budget request. And it also would put the I-budget waiver in the estimating conference, which we've talked about, which again, there's no House companion, so I don't know that this bill has a great chance of going anywhere, but at least it starts the conversation maybe, and we can continue to work on this. There are also a couple of other bills of interest. One is 1271 by Representative Buchanan, and it provides $39 million, and it directs that it go to categories 3, 4, and 5 on the waiting list, which typically APD has only funded categories 1 and 2 when they've gotten wait list funding. So this would be a group of people that are not often served with wait list funds. It also lowers the age in category 4. So category 4 today is individuals with a caregiver 70 years of age or older. If the Buchanan bill passes, that threshold would go down to age 60. There is a companion filed by Senator Broder, 1758.
And
and
Jim,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that that's the APD bill, my understanding, and I don't know if you recall, but Chair Fine, Randy Fine of the Health and Human Services Committee, chairs that committee, the policy committee. During committee, he talked about wanting to clear the wait list for everyone except in that last category of people under 18. So there is the possibility some really good things are going to happen with regard to the wait list this session, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, the trick is because the legislature again has made over the last 5 years, and I did a spreadsheet on this. I just don't have it in front of me right now, but the legislature, if my memory is correct, the legislature has provided a total of like $300 million over the last 5 years, and it's just you're not seeing the increases in waiver enrollment that you might expect.
Jim,
So,
I got the numbers because I got the document you sent me.
oh, okay, good.
This is a presentation you gave with Oklahoma about a few months back.
Right.
You said in the last 5 years, about 20%, rounding, it was 19.81% increase in funding to take people off the wait list, yet only 3.7% in an increase in enrollment.
Right.
And that was really telling because the proviso that's been put on wait list is to only do crisis cases. And the way they define crisis cases, it basically is equaling the amount of people leaving the waiver because of death or maybe leaving the state.
Yeah, and again, just a real quick clarification: the proviso doesn't say that it has to be crisis. What the proviso has said is that the agency is to enroll as many people as they possibly can. And so it's been an issue that effectively it's primarily gone to serve categories 1 and 2. I know that they have 1 year they went through category 5, or so they said, but I'm not sure that people, and this is another, I mean, we could spend an entire hour-long session just talking about the waiting list. Because today the waiting list is triaged, so to speak. There are 7 priority categories, categories 1 and 2, which are essentially crisis. And then you go to category 3, which is people where we know there's some impending life circumstance that's going to change, like, I don't know, say mom just got a cancer diagnosis. So we know that her ability to be a caregiver is going to go away. Things like that. So that's a very limited category. Category 4 is people with a caregiver over age 70, and category 5 are either are young people who are transitioning out of the school system. And I am not sure that people are being accurately assigned to these priority categories. And the reason I say that is because the last time APD supposedly enrolled category 5, that was only 13 people statewide. Now, mind you, category 5 is young people who are transitioning out of the school system. So out of 22,000 people, you would think there'd be more than 13 statewide. And one of our ARC chapters, who runs a school that serves young people who are transitioning, that's who they serve. Not a single one of those students were offered an enrollment, were offered a waiver slot. So one of the things I think, and again, because I don't want to, I want to make sure we get to everybody's questions and comments. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but the thing I would advise the legislature, the thing I would advise you all to advise the legislature, the thing that I would advise the agency, the governor's office, everybody that cares about solving this waiting list and actually making a meaningful difference, they've got to come up with a plan. There has to be expectations. It can't just be proviso that says, hey, take as many people as you can off, because then you don't know what you're buying. And and there's no basis for accountability. And then it's just we're seeing what's happening and we complain about it, and nobody's happy with the outcome from that. So there are ways to go in and to do a review of the people who are on the waiting list, to catalog what they need and to come up with a plan to serve those needs. And part of that plan, quite frankly, has to be you've got to build infrastructure. You've got to build provider capacity, because if you're enrolled off the waiting list and there's not a service provider available for you, then you might as well not have been enrolled off the wait list, because your situation hasn't changed. You're not getting services. And so there needs to be a more thoughtful approach taken to the waiting list. Again, everything I say is my opinion, but my opinion is that there needs to be a more thoughtful, deliberative approach taken to the waiting list, where expectations are established and then there's accountability if those expectations are not met, and there's great praise if those expectations are met. So that's what I'll say about that. And Alan, Dina, if there's other comments.
Yeah, we have a question about the rates for transportation. There hasn't been an increase in quite some time. That does not seem to be reflected in the budget.
Well, that is a great question, and it's not an easy answer. Now, this 10%, in both of the bills we've spoken about, both the House and the Senate bill, these are across the board rate increases. So transportation is technically covered or could be covered. There's no services that are excluded. Now here's the rub: there are no established transportation rates. They're all negotiated. So will it's a good question. Will APD go and renegotiate every rate and provide a rate increase for transportation? I don't know. I mean, I know that that's an issue that's been APD, like I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, they did a big study on, they were supposed to come up with uniform rates for transportation. There was a big work group. I never saw the study. I don't know if it was done or not. If it was done, it wasn't widely distributed. As far as I know, but that's a great question. It's something that I think is something that as advocates, we probably need to remind both the legislature and APD that, again, transportation is one of those prerequisites. If you can't get to the service, then you might as well not have it approved, because it's going to be a service on paper.
Yeah, Jim, all the challenges our providers have with like iConnect taking up additional time and hiring additional staff for that and duplicate entries. We also have the minimum wage go up every year. We had Appendix K go away. We basically have a situation now where across the state, the people running programs are not just manning the day-to-day operation, they're also managing deficits. But one of the things that keeps coming up, and I want to put this on the screen, explain it, is the surpluses that are going on right now at the same time. And people ask me all the time, how can that be? So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I put up on the screen,
Can
can
you,
you see it?
yeah, if you can make those columns a little wider so we can see the numbers on the.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there, no, if you click on, well, here, there you go, get that one. There you go, get this one. Okay, so the what's happened over the last few years is when APD doesn't spend all of the money now. When I was at APD, I had the exact opposite problem. We were running deficits and we were getting our wrist, among other things, slapped over it. But the agency has not had that issue for several years now. They've consistently reverted money. Revert is just, I guess, an accounting term for the agency doesn't spend it. Normally what happens when dollars are not spent, the dollars go back to whatever fund they were appropriated from. In our instance, that would be the state's general fund. However, for the APD I-budget waiver, the legislature has, as a matter of practice over the last several years, reappropriated those dollars to APD. So the 287 million that you're seeing there, that is accumulated a few years worth of surpluses that have been reappropriated. The federal match, that's the if those dollars were expended for waiver services, they would generate 421.6 million of federal matching funds for a total of 708.7 million. Now these are dollars that today are in APD's budget. There are no plans to spend these dollars that I'm aware of, but they are dollars, and there's been media coverage of this issue. There are dollars that are there that are available to serve people that are not, they've been provided by the legislature, and they're not being spent. Now, one thing, as far as to get back to what could the legislature do for people on the waiting list, the legislature could say, hey, that 287 million in general revenue, we could take all or a portion of that, and we could provide services. Maybe we could provide respite, some other kind of support services for people who are currently on a waiting list for services. But that is a it is an issue, and at least as far as what it's looking like today. Again, this is looking at expenditures out of the waiver category to date. It looks like there's going to be another significant surplus at the end of the year. So we're once again in a situation where I don't believe APD is going to spend the entire amount made available by the legislature.
Well, Jim, here's what, people bring this up and stuff, but you see the Senate wanting to give a 10% rate increase, and the House wants to give a 3% rate, 3.5% rate increase. And I'm sitting there going, there's enough money to do this. I mean, they don't even need to put more money in the budget because they don't even spend. They're spending probably 7 cents on the dollar at max. So I just can't, I can't figure that out.
Yeah, I think and again, I can, speaking as a former budget guy, just for those of you who don't know me, I cut my teeth in state government as I worked for the Appropriations Committee in the House for 20 years. So they will, because these were unanticipated surplus dollars, they are not recurring. I think you will find legislative types being very reluctant to use a non-recurring source of funding for a recurring obligation, which a rate increase or even wait list. However, those are significant amount of dollars available that could at least go to provide temporary relief to people who have been stuck on our waiting list for years and years. And again, given that these surpluses seem to be almost a recurring feature of the waiver, it seems like there'll always be a pot of non-recurring money that could go and help people on the waiting list while they're waiting to get that waiver enrollment. And hopefully, if the legislature and the executive branch too, if they can come up with a systematic, deliberative way to address this waiting list, then maybe there's actual, real, permanent relief that can result from these regular increases that the legislature has been providing with recurring dollars to help people enroll off the waiting list. And I see several hands. We're at
We're
at 11:58. Alan, I'll take as many as you.
Let's keep going. I mean, I kept interrupting and wanting to talk about some things, but let's go until we wear everyone out. Or you, or we wear you
Okay.
out.
All right. So let me. I'm gonna. Why don't we do this, Kaya? We're gonna get to you again, but I don't think we've given Cheryl Gonzalez a chance to ask her question, and I see her hand is up. So, Cheryl.
Yes, thank you so very much. I am a parent of a daughter with Down syndrome. She will be 29 this February. I am now 70 years old. We have been on that list for years. I always tell people since she's been born, because of her circumstances, while she's not most critical, what's happening now is I'm older and I need some help in the form of respite care. So when you're talking about the budget, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, why can't they do something even on a temporary basis to help people like myself so that, you know, we can, we don't succumb to problems ourselves due to not having the proper care for our loved ones, and then we're not able to take care of our own mental health status.
Cheryl, I think that is such a good that is a great comment. And let's just say, even if they took a portion of that 287 million, say they took 100 million, boy, that'd buy a lot of respite hours for somebody like you. And even if it were offered as a temporary stopgap, I do think it would do a world of good. And I wish that it's just, if these were tiny numbers that the agency were reverting, that might be one thing. But this has gotten to the point, there's just not much sense to me in having a $287 million pot of general revenue that in the APD budget that just goes unspent. And I think I saw another hand, and I think it's in the chat.
Let's see.
Yeah, Randy, I think.
His question was, if there is such a large surplus, why is there a waiting list?
That you'd have to ask.
Yeah.
You'd have to ask policymakers, and probably, honestly, that's a question that would probably be better directed to probably to APD. I will say one thing, Randy. I think that the legislature would be well served to come up with a plan to serve the wait list.
Yeah.
To invest a little bit of money, and I would recommend a third party be brought in to look at all the people on the waiting list, catalog what they need, determine how much it would cost to serve them, take that information back to the legislature, develop a plan, and then use waitlist dollars in fulfillment of that plan versus what they've done over the last few years. And that's just to basically say, there's X number of dollars provided to serve the waiting list. The agency will enroll as many people as they can. Because when you do that, then you don't have a benchmark. You have no basis. You have no expectation. So you have no benchmark for accountability. And nobody knows what to expect. And I think that kind of, this is like, I don't want to be cliche because and I certainly don't want to be too critical because I'm really thrilled with where everybody is right now. But to just take and throw money at the issue, at a problem, that's never a good, and I'm saying this as an old budget guy, that is never a good solution. If you're going to throw money at something, you need to throw expectations at it as well. That's what
I remember Lucy Haney, Jim. She used to always say, if you don't measure it, you don't treasure it.
There you go.
Well,
I agree.
That's it. I mean, and being in the home mod business, measure twice, cut once is, kind of our mantra. But, as I'm listening to the bills that are in there, I just, it's hard to be optimistic when we know the way that these things are scrutinized is, well, wait a minute, you're asking for an increase, but we didn't even spend what was allotted the previous fiscal year. I don't have a good feeling about whether or not that's going to get approved. And I mean, we'd be better served planning to spend the 200 and some odd $1 million in getting waiver service coordinators' salaries increased so they can take on these caseloads. The people that these agencies have, they're completely overwhelmed. A standard caseload is supposed to be 30 to 35 participants, and some of these WSCs are having to manage in the hundreds. That is not fair to the families that need the help. We have, it looks like we have the money to help that problem, because WSCs, if they're working for the APD entity, it is not a per unit reimbursed rate for case management. Those are state employees, are they not?
Yep.
So why not?
Wait, no. Waiver support coordinators are private sector employees.
They're private sector employees.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not public sector employees, but still, if the rate was the reimbursement rate to the agencies that are providing, or the individuals that are providing targeted case management, waiver supports coordination, even if they have to change the name of the position to targeted case manager, which is exactly what it is for developmental and intellectual disabilities. These people specialize in those services for those particular clients. And it's why DDID is carved out of managed care in most states, because the managed care entities just don't have the experience in targeted case management. Why not use that funding we already have? Like it just seems like a no-brainer to me. If it's going to get people access to care, you rebudget it. I mean, 200 million is enough to pull 50 people off the wait list for 2.5, 3 years. Like, well, I don't understand.
I can tell you what we've been doing after session, and Jim educated us what was going on. We've been going with every legislature saying this surplus, the reason it's not being spent is because we can't hire people. And, we can only spend what you give us. And that's why I talk about we're managing deficits. If they did nothing this year, everyone will be going out of business in the next year or two. In fact, when we did a survey of all the providers, 37% of them plus reduced services last year, and the prognosis did not look good for next year. So, that's hard to explain. There's a surplus to a policymaker, and yet we're asking more money to be in the budget.
But what about polling the agencies as to why they can't hire people? I mean, that's the reality is for case management, for waiver supports coordination, the rate is just not a point of attraction for the individual that
That,
has experience.
that's the point. So if you
Yeah.
hire people, you have to pay like, let's say $18 or $17. All it means is your deficit goes up each year and you go out of business sooner. So they're trying to survive right now. In this session, I hope takes us there. So I see Samara Hoffman has her hand up.
Yeah, let's go to Samara. Yeah, is it Samira Hoffman? Yeah, you need to unmute Ms. Hoffman. All right. All right. So Ms. Hoffman, maybe we'll come back. Kaya, did you have a follow-up from earlier?
Yeah, I did. Speaking of governor, do you think he actually takes the waiver seriously? I mean, that's another thing that I'm questioning is, does he even care about what APD and ARC Florida are actually trying to do?
Well, he clearly, I think the answer is yes. Whether he's
Okay.
again, he's recommended 79 million.
Yeah,
For the
yeah,
waiver
that's a
list, he
lot.
recommended 60 million to help our
Yeah,
providers.
yeah.
I
And this, you know, and the support coordinators, I don't feel they get paid enough, you know, they need to raise their pay because they have a lot of cases. And it's
Right.
like mine, she's always calling me information, you know, any other information? And I have tons of people interested on my caseload even. Um, you know, and I know they're private, you know, but yeah, they need to start pulling in funding for them as well, because they're purchasing their gas, I find out too, which I feel maybe they don't need to be doing.
right.
So I'm really down to earth with Suzanne Almers, you know, as far as, you know, that issue there as well. She'll call me and just ask me, you know, have you heard from so and so? Do you know this answer? And sometimes I can give her the direct answer, and then sometimes I have to, you know, pull some information, get things in my mind, you know, as well. So that's, and the meeting on 119, what is that in regards to? If somebody is there, because I'm kind of interested in setting in on that as well.
Okay,
I
Alan,
think
I'll
it's this
let you
week.
address the meeting on on the 19th.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
it's one of our ones.
yeah, and Samira, if you could maybe put your question in the chat. Again, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Right.
But if you can't, just if you'll put it in the chat, I'll try to address it. And Dina, let me ask you real quick, and I see Ms. Gonzalez will get to you. I want to make sure that I get to Dina. Is there anything in the chat? And then we'll
A lot of it is just, you know, commenting back and forth. There was a question on qualified organizations. Why are QOs not providing an agency rate? I don't know if you are able to answer that or not.
well, they should be provided. I mean, they are provided the agency rate whenever they went when they essentially discontinued the solo, then the the I mean the rate today is the rate paid to agencies because there's no such thing as a solo.
Right. Maybe there's just miscommunication.
Yeah, I mean now the issue is again I know that there are a lot of the people there are, there are a lot of, I know that the support coordination agencies, they are under financial stress, just like the rest of the provider community. Again, as I read it, they would get a 10% bump if the Senate rate increase passes. They will get a 3.5% bump if the House version passes, or if the legislature compromises some. So I believe that you're in line for an increase. I think the issue is just how much. And then if it's still insufficient, then I think that's an area that we're going to have to continue to advocate. I don't believe the work of advocacy will ever be done. I think that's just the bottom line. We're never going to achieve utopia, but we're always going to work towards it. And I wanted to, Dina, unless there's another question in the chat, I wanted to get back to Ms. Gonzalez.
No, that's fine.
Okay, Ms. Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you so very much. As a former legislative reporter many hundreds of years ago, it doesn't matter in the sense who's governor. What matters is what's discussed in that committee, and then what's taken on the floor, and what gets passed in both houses, and so of the legislature. And so to me, it also goes back to the agencies or entities that have funding or have been provided approval to be responsible for the monies that go to them and how they are used to help. So one part of me says, well, what are the entities that are responsible for providing the services doing to say, hey, we need more money, and this is how we're going to use those funds based on the new requests we've had, the old requests that have been there since 30, 40, 50 years ago. And this is what we could do to further help the people of this state. I'm speaking again from 28, 29 years ago when I was pregnant with my daughter. I didn't know that she had Down syndrome, but I knew I was going to take care of her. When she was born, she had Down syndrome. And the first thing they said was get on that waiting list because you never know how long it's going to take. And, I've been on it for going on 29 years now. And so for me, it's not about having services on an ongoing basis. If I could just get 1 or 2 opportunities, that would be tremendous, because right now it's been 0. And I'm sure there are people who have critical needs. But I went from being a working mom to now being a retired single mom with a daughter with Down syndrome who has needs, and she's doing a very good job with some of the other programs around. But I need help too. That's all I'm saying. So the entities that are responsible for managing the dollars, to me, have a responsibility in this as well.
Let me, and I think your points are all well taken. One thing I would mention to you, if you've just turned 70, is reach out to your APD case manager. You should have one if you're on the waiting list. Hopefully you hear from them at least once a year.
That is correct. Every October.
Okay. Make sure you reach out to that person and that your daughter is reflected in category 4 now that you're 70 years old. Because there may well be funding that is earmarked for category 4. And you don't want, you don't want to be in category 6 if you qualify to be in category 4. And I think you have to be proactive.
Okay.
Get that.
Thank you.
Good advice, Jim. Jim, I know your time. I know you got things to do with the Capitol and stuff. I would like to end it with maybe Melissa, if you can unmute and give some comments. I know you've talked to Director Hatch. You've been up here talking to people, and give some last thoughts, and then maybe Jim could basically wrap it up.
Okay. Hi, everybody. as far as just the last thing that you had said, Cheryl, there is in one of the bills, they're looking to lower that age from 70 to 60 for, you know, older parents taking care of their kids with developmental disabilities. And yeah, this is an exciting year. I'm glad that there's a lot going on with this. The bottom line, though, for anybody that is on the waiver program or waiting to get on the waiver program, that you have to have a support coordinator. And one of the things that's in Buchanan's bill and Brodeur's bill is that people are going to be educated not just on the waiver, but on CDC. And the consumer directed care has even less consultants than support coordinators available in the state. So that's definitely something to just, you know, keep in mind. That's something that I'm bringing up to the legislators as I'm meeting with them. I met with about 12 this past week, and I'm heading back up either very late tonight or tomorrow morning. And I have a number of other meetings scheduled the next couple of days to go over the issues with quality case management, especially the, you know, support coordination. The pilot program is going to be addressing the people that are on the wait list, and the pilot not only has the 27 waiver services, but also is braiding in the long-term care waiver, and then also the services that are listed under Florida statute 409 point something. I don't have it in front of me, but that is what the pilot is going to address. Anybody that is voluntarily going to enroll on the pilot program has to be on there for at least a year before they can even select to go on to the regular waiver. But you know, that's going on. Hopefully there'll be, you know, better, you know, increases so that qualified organizations will be able to take people off of the wait list. But as it is right now, there's 193 qualified organizations doing support coordination in the state of Florida, and only a very small percentage of those are even willing to take people off of the wait list. And the legislature and APD know that. They know that a lot of them are mostly solo providers that had joined up after Senate Bill 82, and nobody in those particularly smaller qualified organizations is going to hire support coordinators. So they don't want to give a rate increase just generally right across the board for that, for those organizations that are not willing to increase and hire coordinators and take people off of the wait list. So that's definitely a conundrum that those of us who do have those qualified organizations who are willing to hire coordinators and take people off of the wait list are kind of, we're kind of all in the same boat one way or another. So again, there's a lot going on, but one of the biggest things that has been driving this has been the family's involvement, the families speaking out, the families going to the delegations, the families writing letters, the families making phone calls, the families setting appointments and meeting with the legislators and making it personal to them, bringing in their loved one with a developmental disability so they can actually see their constituents. And that's about it.
And lastly, Jim, first of all, I want to let you know we appreciate you so much. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how we'd educate families and advocates and all that you do. I know you got Family Cafe, you chair that committee. You do a lot more throughout the system, but just want to give you a chance to wrap it up and say anything you want before we go off.
Well, again, I enjoy speaking to all of you. Every time I get the opportunity to do this, I jump on it because I enjoy it. I appreciate the feedback that I get from all of you. I guess how I'd wrap this up is I think we're at a point just in having followed these issues. Gosh, I've had an interest in the IDD issues now for over 30 years. We have about as good of an environment in the legislature and in the executive branch as we've ever had. Again, we're starting out, we're virtually guaranteed rate increases and wait list funding. And this used to be harder than pulling hen's teeth. So we're in a great spot. The thing is, there's more money in the system than there's ever been, and more people being served than there's ever been. But there's just a lot more work left to do. It's not a time for any of us, particularly those of us who are now advocates. Now's not the time to let up. Now's the time to put the pedal to the metal. And again, the idea of, I guess the one thing I'd want to leave you all with is, it's one thing for the legislature to invest money, but these investments need to come with clear expectations, and there needs to be accountability. That is the thing I'd preach to all of you, because what is truly frustrating to me is to look at how much money has been poured into the system over the last several years, and then to see the results and the fact that we're still talking about the same basic issues today that we were talking about 20 years ago. And they're not easy issues. This is not a criticism of anybody, not APD, not the governor, not the legislature, but just as we're advocating for these things, also advocate for accountability, for increased knowledge. That social service estimating conference, probably not going to happen this year, but that will be a huge victory whenever it does happen. And I believe it will happen, because for the first time ever, we'll have people who are looking with an objective eye to what are the needs? What are the needs out there, and what will it cost to serve them? Today, we don't know that. And this is all dry, number-driven stuff, but you've got to have that in order to make progress. We've got to know more about what we're doing with dollars and what we know today. And I guess that's the last thing I would say, Alan, is we need to become more data-driven. And I know that's not particularly inspiring to people, but you just can't effectively manage a $2 billion program without data, without ways to hold people who are spending those dollars accountable. And I guess that's my parting message.
Jim, thanks a lot. Normally we don't give a standing ovation or anything, but I think the fact that no one got off the call, even though we went 30 minutes over, says a lot about what you have to say. And you are the E.F. Hutton of APD, apparently. But we appreciate it. And I know we don't have another one of these scheduled, but when something happens this session that we feel like we know where we're at late in the session, we'll schedule another one, invite Jim. He never turns us down. And we'll have another time where we talk about what happened. And thanks for everyone being on, and thanks for your advocacy. You are the experts. You're living it every day as families. And those providers, I know how difficult it is when you can't serve everyone in your community. So have a great day. Back to the Capitol to advocate some more. We're right here at the ARC, where policy meets advocacy. So talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Enjoyed it.